Welcome to Bunch Formation, your newest favorite college football show. I am Chris Vannini, and the Indiana Hoosiers will play for the national championship of college football. They dispatch Oregon 56-22, and joining me to talk about it, Scott Dochterman, my colleague at The Athletic. David Ubben is at the game, currently on the field. Welcome to everybody if you're watching live. David's on the field. Don't think he's going to be able to join us from Scott, our Big Ten writer based in Iowa. Happy to join us. Scott, can you believe Indiana is going to play for the national championship?
I feel like I've said this like a million times over the last 2 years, Chris, but it's really hard to fathom. I mean, Indiana 2 years ago was the walking kick me sign of the Big Ten. Everybody wanted them for homecoming, and maybe they'd reach a bowl game. I remember after Terry Hepner died in 07, It was like, let's play 13. And they got to the 13th game, and it was like, this was the greatest season they ever had. And here we are, 2 years after Kurt Signetti, Google me, I win. And holy cow. I mean, that's what they're doing. It's unreal.
Welcome to everybody who's watching either live on Twitter or on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please like the video. It helps. And if you're watching on Twitter or if you're listening after the fact, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. New show this year. It's been a lot of fun. Trying to grow this thing, and it's been a lot of fun. If you're watching and you have any comments, throw them in. I can see them. We'll react to them. We will talk to them. Not as good of a game as the previous night with Miami and Ole Miss. A quick rundown of the game. Very first play of the game, pick six. Dante Moore throws, intercepted by Pons, and you're just like, wow, like the worst possible start you could imagine for a football team. Oregon responds with a really good 75-yard drive to tie it up, and you're like, all right, offensive line's moving some guys. Maybe we'll have a game. Instead, Indiana methodical drive down with the Mendoza touchdown pass. Dante Moore fumbles the ball in a wind-up trying to throw the ball. Indiana gets it. Touchdown inside the 5, 21-7, and it was pretty much over from that point. 35-7 at halftime, and it went on from there. Indiana has beaten – so they beat Alabama 38-3. They beat Oregon 56-22. Like, this team is getting better, it feels like, as the season goes on, which is crazy for a team that is 15-0. By the way, I forgot to mention this at the top. Only one team in the history of college football at the FBS or the highest level has gone 16-0. That was Yale in 1894. And now Indiana, of all teams, could be the second team to do that. But, I mean, like, Indiana playing better as the year goes on. I mean, Scott, would you agree with that as somebody who watched this team a lot this year?
Yeah, I would say so. I think they've had different markers to where they've taken off. I would say the Illinois game, it had a feel a lot like this one, where Illinois was ranked in the top 10, and they're rivals in a way where it's not historical for this sport because neither one have been that good, but they compete over the same players. And I think Signetti wanted to make a statement, and they did. I mean, they had a block punt, D'Angelo Pons for a touchdown. Illinois scores on a big long pass, and then it was 35-10 at halftime, and it kind of went off from there. But I would say the one of the big important games for them was the following week in Iowa City, where it was 13-13. Mendoza throws an interception with 3 minutes to go. Iowa had them on the ropes. Their backup quarterback threw a pass right at the running back's feet, and it forced a field goal. He misses it, and then Surratt catches a 49-yard touchdown pass. That was like one marker where it's like, okay, they finally went on the road, played a quality opponent, and got a win. Then they go to Oregon and win, and that was big at the time. But then that first Oregon win was the win where I was like, oh, this team's like legit now. Because last year's team, when they played in the teams who were actually any good, didn't play well or they lost. When you go to Oregon and win the first time, that's when I was like, oh, this team actually might be different. Yeah, and the offensive line is so much better this year, Chris. I mean, last year there were kind of holdovers other than Carter Smith and Mike Caddick. I mean, they were just kind of pushed together in Signetti's first year, and they did a nice job. And Bob Bostad did a great job putting them together. But when they went up against teams that had dudes like Notre Dame and Ohio State, which of course went to the national title game, both of them, it was you could tell that there was a step down. This year, when they go to Oregon and bully them at the line of scrimmage, they were able to take that next step. And then I think the Penn State game was important for them because Penn State had a lot of talent. Only one of their losses this year came by more than 4 or 5 points, and yet they to pull out that win. Fast forward it to beating Ohio State was a true. I think that's when they realized that they were a national title contender.
And now they're rolling. Like I think it was Dan Wolken said, like this feels like 2019 LSU in terms of success meeting confidence. This Indiana team knows now that they are going to go out and kick your ass, and they play like it, and they believe that they can do that. And it felt like last year it didn't feel like they could do that. And as far as this game, like, I mean, Indiana was a 4-point favorite. They'd already gone to Oregon and won. I picked Indiana to win. David picked them to win by 1 or 2 scores. Nobody could have seen this type of performance coming, just like the Alabama game. And that's why it's kind of scary if you're Miami playing a team that is playing as well as it is. And I think like in this game, Indiana comes into this game. We know they don't beat themselves. Or while we're talking, Fernando Mendoza is about to speak on ESPN. I can't hear it. I don't have the volume up. I can't imagine what he's going to say here. But we knew coming into the game, Indiana does not beat themselves. Number 1 in the country in third down, number 1 in the country in turnover margin, third fewest penalties in the country. What happened tonight? Well, let me get the final box score up so I make sure I have the final stats right. Indiana goes 11 for 14 on third down. They're +3 in turnover margin, and they had 5 penalties, which is actually high for them. They're usually at like 3. So once again, they just didn't beat themselves. And Oregon, a couple of those things, was the absolute worst thing you could do. Pick 6 on the first play of the game and the fumble when you're doing the wind up and you throw to the other guy. Like Oregon just didn't even give themselves a chance in this game. And I think that's what's got to be most frustrating.
Yeah, and I think the one that was most troubling for me was probably when the zone read where the running back didn't get he was the 4th team running back, got in the way and bumped the ball, and Indiana recovered it. I thought, man, that's what happens when you have injuries and players who aren't used to those situations. I mean, think back just a few months ago, Chris, where we're talking about Mekhi Hughes is probably going to be a first-team All-American, and he didn't redshirt in that. Yeah, and he ended up hitting the portal and everything. But then when you're top 2 are injured, one's broken clavicle and the other is barely playing because of his leg, they're kind of hamstrung, and it didn't allow them to have their full ability on offense. They needed to control the clock because Dante Moore can make some passes, and it just wasn't able to happen when you're not able to control the clock and the ball and give your defense a chance, because Indiana is so good in any facet you want to go. If you want to spread it out and play up and down the field, they can do it. If you want to play slug it out, slam ball like Big Ten traditionally teams do, Indiana could do that too. And as you said, they don't kill themselves.
Like in that first game, Oregon actually ran the ball pretty well when they played up in Eugene. I mean, Davison, I think, averaged 7 yards a carry, and Whittington was like over 5 yards a carry. But then coming into this game, Davison's out. Whittington had turf toe, but he didn't take a rush. I don't know if he saw the field or not, but he did not have a carry in this game. So he was clearly not much of anything. And the receivers, Gary Bryant Jr., didn't have a catch. Decorian Moore didn't have he had 2 catches. So like those guys had been banged up. Oregon's been banged up all playoff long. And that's a situation where it's you're like 4th string running back. He hasn't had those chemistry reps with Dante Moore to know when you're not taking the ball on the handoff, how far out of the way you kind of got to get so the quarterback can make it. It's like those little things that the injuries can really pile up, and that's what Indiana just doesn't have a problem with. They really just kind of dominated on that side. Here's a crazy. So as Fernando Mendoza is speaking on the stage right now, here's a what's his final number? I believe Fernando Mendoza in the playoff, 8 touchdown passes, 5 incomplete passes. Like, and that was with 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, so the final might have been a little bit different. But that is like unreal, that efficiency.
It's like your video game numbers, Chris, probably on one of your dynasty teams.
Not when I'm playing Ubben. That's more like Ubben when he's playing me, I guess. But yeah, like that is crazy.
You know, I've talked to coaches that have played against him, and one of the things that they just marvel at is not only is he so accurate, but he reads the field so well, but his arm strength is really underrated because he can go from either hash mark to the field, either side, and hit people on a dime. I mean, we're seeing that even in his first drive. Back shoulder throws to Elijah Surratt. He's covered. He's actually tackled. Yes. I think the officiating was brutal in this game. It didn't cause a winner or loser, but it's like, dudes, you got to start calling some of these plays. I mean, if this was in the NFL, we'd have 15 PIs, but
Surratt had two. Surratt had 2 of those. Both of them were PIs. One wasn't called. One was, but he caught both of them. Like you put a Heisman Trophy winner and quarterback who's extremely accurate with guys who just do not drop the ball. What was the number? There's like 5 or 6 drop passes by Indiana on Fernando Mendoza passes all season long. Like Becker doesn't miss anything either. Like how do you stop that? I don't know how you stop this Indiana offense with the efficiency they have, the physicality in the trenches, the quarterback, the receivers. It's unreal. It's unbelievable. As we watch the confetti come down.
It's like the perfect confluence in this era of what is possible for anybody. You get both sides of the pendulum, though. For one, you look at Indiana, which we've established was the losingest program in college football history until mid-November.
Now it's Northwestern for people who don't know who it is. Now Northwestern.
Now it's Northwestern. But they have the money to spend. They spend it the right way. They have a great coaching staff who not only develops players, but brings them in and coaches up the ones who are experienced. And you can do that in such a palatable way that is and it's efficient and it's solid and everything you want to do. But on the other hand, for other teams and other programs, it's like, well, why can't we do that? And I said, look, this is loaves and fishes. This is biblical miracle type. Yes. To have this everything happen at the same time. And yet, I don't know that I don't know it's possible in the future for them, but I know that they're going to be in this fight every single year because of the guys that they got. And they're all G5 guys mostly. That's the most impressive part.
Yeah, as a Michigan State grad, every Michigan State fan lost their mind. Mm-hmm. Kurt Signetti hired in the same cycle as Jonathan Smith, and you see what Kurt Signetti's done. But that can't be your comparison. Was it comparison is the thief of joy or something like that? You can't compare anything to what Kurt Signetti is doing because this is just it's never been done before. It's truly unbelievable. But the other thing, this is a very old team. I think every starter is like a redshirt junior or more or something like that. And they are going to lose a lot of guys next year, but they're going to add a lot of guys too. They're adding Nick Marsh, the receiver from Michigan State. They're adding Josh Hoover, the quarterback from TCU. So it is still going to be a pretty older team. Now, I'm not going to say Indiana's going to go on a Alabama type run or anything like Saban. I don't think anybody can do that anymore in this world of college football. But nobody can see Indiana, dropping off like they were. And Kurt Signetti signed a new big contract to stay. And I wrote about it today on The Athletic. He gets in October, he signs a new contract to stay at Indiana when Penn State was interested, ups his average salary to $11.6 million. This guy was making $600,000 2 years ago. Now he's up to $11.6 million. But there was a clause in the contract that said if he makes a semifinal, he then has to basically become a top 3 paid coach, or else his buyout to leave drops to 0. And that means in Lane Kiffin's deal at LSU put him up to $13 million. So that knocked Cincinnati out of the top 3. So he's about to get another million or so at least added onto his contract already after just signing that new deal. And he has said he wants to retire there. He's 64 years old. I don't think he's going to go to the NFL. I don't think he's going to go to the Raiders with Mendoza. I don't think the Raiders can afford it, first of all, because it
Mhm.
costs $15 million to buy him out. And I don't even think he really wants to. So I don't see Indiana really dropping off either. As far as this game, the questions I had coming in, could Oregon run the ball with the running back injuries? Ultimately, they could not. And could they protect Dante Moore? Because Indiana had 6 sacks in the first game between these two teams. The answer was no. Indiana had 3 sacks in the first half. Oregon's allowed 19 sacks on the season. 9 of those are just from Indiana. Like that, and that's without Stephen Daly in this game. Like this Indiana team defensively was unbelievable.
Yeah, and Stephen Daly was the backup to Kellen Wyatt before that, and both of them are knocked out. And then you bring in the third guy, number 17, Daniel. I don't want to butcher his last name, and all he does is get a couple of sacks, a forced fumble, and blocks a punt. So they're just bringing in guys who immediately fill roles. I mean, Charlie Becker was that way when Elijah Surratt went out, and voila, now you have 4 great wide receivers. They have 2 running backs. Earlier in the year, Lee Beebe goes out with a season-ending injury, and they're still rolling at this position. It's really remarkable. And the thing is, Chris, we've been around every team. Every team tries to put this chip on their shoulder. Georgia tries to do it every single year, and it's laughable because
look, that year they won that year. The one Nakobe Dean was right. Everybody said they were going to go 7-5, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, they win 7 and then they win 5. It wasn't 7-5. In this case, they're legitimate because people did not think that they could do it, and all these guys were G5 guys, or in Elijah Surratt's case was St. Francis before he went to G5. So I think they're at this situation where they fuel it, and the one thing that's really impressive to me about this is they're not getting prototype guys. They're smart enough to understand they can't get them. They can't afford them, first, and second of all, they're going to Ohio State or Alabama or whatever.
Well, so they kind of are. They kind of are now. That's the thing. Now they're going to.
Yeah, but you look like Tyreek Tucker, a 6'0", 290-pound defensive tackle that just goes in and kills people. And it's just, it's really impressive the way that they're able to say he can play, he's experienced, he's had production, and this guy's got an extra heartbeat. And they walk in and they do this over and over and over again. And, I think people are perplexed, but I think it's also really healthy for the sport, Chris, that we look at, if Indiana can do this, if Ole Miss can get to where they were with this mixed up coaching situation, if Miami can finally straighten it all out, Oregon is losing both of its coordinators, and yet they're in the Final Four and Indiana is pulling through. I think it does mean that now there is enough parity in the sport where it's not log jammed at the very top with a handful of SEC teams, 2 or 3 Big Ten teams, and maybe a Clemson or somebody. I think now everybody could say, if we play our cards right, if we hit the portal right, if we have the right coaching staff in place, we can compete for a national title. And that hasn't been the case in college football history.
No, and again, Indiana's team talent ranking in 24/7 Sports, they're down at 72. They're like around Toledo and Georgia State and stuff like that. And it's not like they even got good transfers. I think they had like 2 top 100 transfers on this team too. It blows up everything we know about the sport. Now, I was in Chicago earlier today, woke up at 5 a.m. I was up there recording something for the Athletics show on Fire TV, and they were asking me, like, is this good for college football? And it's like all the off-field stuff and the drama and the various things, there are issues off the field, undoubtedly. But when you talk about what's going on the field, this is as good as it could possibly be. The idea that everybody has a chance. That period in the mid-2010s when it was Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, over and over and over and over, it was not good for the sport. That's why the playoff expanded. The playoff expanded to give other teams something to play for, and that other thing was making the playoff. I mean, I said when it expanded, I said the trade-off is, yes, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State will win more national championships because they will get more mulligans. But other teams will have other things to play for and getting into the field, and I think that's a worthy trade-off. Well, then you have the NIL portal stuff happen at the exact same time, completely unrelated to it, and that opens up suddenly all of this is possible here, where Miami, last team in the field, 10 seed, playing for the national championship at home. That's going to be a fascinating. That's going to be a fascinating environment there in Miami because it's a Miami home game, but we have seen Indiana travel like we haven't seen anybody travel in a long time. That was like 90% Indiana fans down there in Atlanta. Same at the Rose Bowl. The ticket prices for this game are going to be absolutely insane. I think they're currently over like $3,000 just to get in. I'll be there in Miami. Scott, you're going to be there?
Yeah, I'm going to be there as well.
Yeah,
so.
we'll both be down there. It should be a heck of a scene. Cannot wait for that. We'll talk Indiana, Miami a little bit at the end. We'll also talk about it next week when David is back on the show. Let's talk about Oregon for a moment here. Good team, good season. Very frustrating that the injuries didn't have you at your best at the end of the season. I still don't know what happened on that bye week when everybody got hurt. You know, like that was a very strange situation. You have the running backs getting hurt now late in the season too. You know, it's got to be frustrating if you're Phil Knight and you've put so much money into this program for so long and you're on a side of the bracket that doesn't have Ohio State and you're not even in the championship game because you've just happened to run into yet another buzzsaw team out of nowhere. How do you kind of look at this Oregon season and kind of the program as a whole?
Yeah, their season came to a thud, no question. I mean, after, having a pretty good game against Texas Tech, a team that was the, crown jewel of the Big 12 defensively. And yet, they proved to be the more dominant defense that day. They won 23-0. It really could have been more. They wouldn't have taken, gone for it 8 times on 4th down.
Yeah.
But I think you look at it in the totality, they did lose a lot last year after winning the Big Ten championship in the first season in the Big Ten, going 13-0 and then getting annihilated by Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. And I think when you take that step back, Dan Lanning is 48-8 in his first 4 years.
Yeah.
That's an incredible record. Every year they won double digits. The last 3, they've won at least 12 games. So this has just been a remarkable run when you look at it holistically. However, when you start to peel it back, that's where the aggravation starts. It does for anybody, but when you say 2 years ago, they were right there and getting to the 14 field. They lose to their arch rival Washington twice. That really was a killer.
Yeah. By the way, here are those 8 losses for Dan Lanning, dating back to his first game. Georgia, that team won the national championship. That same year, he lost to Washington and Oregon State, both top 20 teams. Then the next year, 23, lost twice to Washington, who played for the national championship. Last year, you lost to Ohio State, who won the national championship. This year, your only losses are to Indiana, who will play for the national championship. Yeah. So it's like he's only losing to the very best teams, like the very, very best. The problem is he's not really winning them. To have lost to Washington twice, to have lost to Indiana twice. This is really 3 years in a row. He has had to play a team that played for the national championship twice. And he's 1-5 in those games. And some of them not even close, like this one and then last year against Ohio State. What do you, a bunch of people on Twitter were saying he's the new James Franklin. I'm not going to go that far, but it's the big game question starts to come up.
It's fair. It's fair to question it because even when you go back to season 1, the last game of season 1, those 2 losses in the Pac-12, he was not, they were ranked, but he was a top 10 team both times.
Yeah, I was at that game in Seattle, and they lose on a missed field goal as time expires.
Yeah. And then the Oregon State loss. You were in the top 10 and you lose a chance to win the Pac-12, possibly sneak into the 14 playoff. Then 2 years ago, both those games were epic, but that is a huge series. And I think, that's a big deal. And then last year and this year, the 2 losses in the playoff really sting because they could not stem any momentum on the other team's offense at all. They had they were like ice and Zamboni was running over them. They're down 34-0 late in the first half against Ohio State. Today it was 35-7.
35-7 at halftime.
So up, in both scores, 34-8 and 35-7. You're talking about 69-15 at halftime to two Big Ten teams. That's something that sticks with you. What's going to take to compete in those games? It's not that they're that far. I mean, these games got away from them, but you got to, in order to win national titles, you got to compete in your backyard, and the Big Ten is part of their backyard now. So I wouldn't put him in James Franklin territory. There were too many games where his coaching cost them, wins. Dan Lanning, had a lot of issues in this game, and I think that went against him. I think that they're still a very good program, but they're going to have to figure out a way, and it's going to be tough. I think the factors that the Big Ten has of being on the West Coast and circling and going back and forth over and over and over again. I mean, they went to Miami, then they went back home. They went to Atlanta, and this is after going through the Big Ten season. That's a lot of travel for young people. And we have this many injuries. It catches up to you. So they're going to have to figure something out. And I don't know how they do it, but they're going to have to figure it out.
Who could have foreseen that travel, becoming an issue at all? We didn't have maps before the Big Ten expanded. We didn't really know what was going to happen there. Anybody watching or listening live, please drop in any questions or comments, and we'll get to them. D Gill, a lot of numbers, says Ryan Day was in the same boat as Lanning, close but kept losing in the playoffs until finally he won the whole thing. Just have to keep knocking on that door. And I think I agree with that. I mean, like Ryan Day, he loses that semifinal to Georgia on the missed field goal. And if he makes that field goal, you're probably beating TCU in the national championship. You go into several of those Michigan games with the playoff on the line, they can't get it done. And eventually you do. And I think that's the same with Oregon. I mean, they're so good at getting talent, developing talent. They're obviously not going to go anywhere. But man, like not that you necessarily have windows, but it's going to be harder for everybody to sustain. And we don't know if Dante Moore is going to be back next year, the quarterback at Oregon. The thought has been he's the number 2 prospect, maybe the number 2 pick behind Fernando Mendoza at number 1. But I think what you saw tonight were some of those things that the reason that Mendoza is number 1 and the reason that people think Dante Moore might be better suited staying another year in college where he will make a lot of money. It's not like he'll miss out on money necessarily. So we'll see. We haven't had an answer on that. ESPN reported before the game that Oregon doesn't have an answer one way or another. But if he does leave, quarterbacks are filling up in the portal. There's not that many guys out there. I think ESPN mentioned Dylan Raiola as a potential possibility if needed, which I'm not really sure about that. Like, you only have these guys like Dante Moore for such a short period of time, and you don't want to kind of blow that window. So we'll see. People seem to think he's going to stay another year, but we don't know yet for sure. And it's possible Oregon doesn't know. And in this game and in the Texas Tech game, he wasn't bad, but he had very little help. I mean, in this game, he goes 24 for 39, 285 yards, 2 touchdowns, the pick 6, the fumble. Fumble's not really his fault. No, he fumbled twice, actually. One of the fumbles, I think, was his fault. The other one wasn't his fault. But he threw 2 interceptions, I believe, in the first Indiana game. So in those big games, the turnovers sometimes a bit of a problem. He had no running game with him. He's down to backup receivers. He doesn't have that much necessarily around it, but not the best performance, I think, in a game like this.
Yeah, and let's look at his career arc a little bit. He played as a true freshman. I mean, uber talented, no question about it. Played as a true freshman at UCLA, transfers, backs up Dylan Gabriel last year, red shirts. This year, first year under center, and he's played really well. I mean, I think for the first half of the season, up until that Indiana game, he was mentioned as a possible Heisman candidate. And I think now what's interesting is Oregon has a fighting chance to keep him, whereas 5 years ago, before NIL, he's gone to the NFL because he's going to make real money. Now they can make the money pretty close, and they can, and then he gets that extra year of instruction. Now I'm sure he's wondering, okay, am I going to continue to grow without Will Stein there? That's going to
Yeah.
be a big question. And, or am I better off going to, whether it's not Vegas, if Mendoza goes to Vegas, going to the Jets, which is always fearful for anybody.
Not great. It's not a great situation with the Jets.
Yeah. Or hoping, crossing your fingers, somebody trades up for you at some place that develops quarterbacks. But that's all uncertainty, and it's a luck of the draw. So I like him. I think he is going to be a tremendous quarterback. I saw him make one of the best passes I've ever seen in college football in Iowa City in a driving rainstorm.
That was unbelievable.
And,
on the winning, I was on the one on the winning drive, right? On the winning field goal drive.
Yeah, when they kicked the field goal with 3 seconds left to beat Iowa 18-16. And it was up the sideline in the rain, perfectly placed to Malik Benson. And he's capable of that. He showed some moxie tonight against a really good team. But I think, does he want to be better? Does he want to put himself in that position? And that's a real question. And can he do it at this level, or does he take his next step to the next level? I think that's a huge question that he's going to have to answer within the next few days.
It's kind of funny. Oregon outgained Indiana in this game, actually, 378 to 362, which just goes to show you the value of special teams and of turnovers and of field position. Because Indiana got 7 points on a pick six. They got 14 more points on very short fields after fumbles. They got another 7 points after the blocked punt for a short drive. That's 28 points right there in a game that you won by 34. Oregon just didn't give itself a chance in this game. And like, you take out those horrible mistakes, you may have a more competitive game ultimately. But that takes us to a quick preview of the national championship, because you know a team that likes to make a lot of bad mistakes and put itself in a bad position? The Miami Hurricanes, who nearly gave away that game to Ole Miss last night before rallying with the drive and scoring in the final 30 seconds to win that game. Indiana, from what I've seen, opening somewhere between like a 6 to 8 point favorite is what I see. At that point, you're really putting maybe 3 points on the home field of it all, potentially, because it literally is Miami's home stadium. But this game, that game on the 19th, that is going to be a war in the trenches, man. And I cannot wait to see what Indiana and Miami do inside, because both of those lines on both sides are going to try to beat the piss out of each other. And I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I love this matchup because of that very reason. I'm an offensive line of scrimmage guy anyway. I've seen it most of my life. And I think in this situation, you've got one of the best offensive lines in the country in what Indiana offers. And they're just really gritty, blue collar. They're actually not as explosive as Oregon is as an offensive line. They were number 3 out of 3 for the Joe Moore. Iowa won it and Oregon was second. But they just get in front of people and they stick with them, and they're physical and nasty. And then you look at what Miami does up front, with Ruben Bain and the other guys. I mean, it's just a really physical lineup. But last night watching that Ole Miss game, I'm thinking Miami is dominating this game. 41 minutes of time of possession. They are clubbing the line of scrimmage, yet they found ways to keep Ole Miss in it and damn near through the game at the end. And this is a matchup where you cannot do that with Indiana. You're going to have to play your best game to stay with them, because if you make a mistake, if you just inexplicably, and Mario Cristobal kind of has that hanging over his head anyway. I mean, from the Georgia Tech game a few years ago to just losing 2 games this year against opponents that weren't bad. I mean, Louisville and SMU were good teams, but there weren't national championship caliber teams. They were sloppy losses because they had penalties and turnovers and things like that hadn't appeared. Yeah.
In the Texas A&M win, and wasn't there in the Ohio State game. I don't think they committed a penalty against Ohio State, but then against Ole Miss, it kind of showed up again. And that's a game where Carson Beck has done a really good job taking care of the ball. I think he has 2 interceptions in the last 7 games. One of them is the tip ball against Ole Miss. Not really his fault. That was just kind of a fluky play. Miami's going to have to play Miami's going to have to play perfect, essentially, to have a chance. And that's what D. Gill says too. If Miami plays a perfect game like they did, they might only lose by 21. And I'm very curious what Indiana's going to do. Like what Brian Haynes, the defense coordinator, does to disguise coverages, to disguise pressures. Like he's one of the best assistant coaches in the country with what they've been doing. And how is Carson Beck going to see that? How is someone who's in his 5th year of college football, been a starter for 3 years, how is he going to see that? Because Carson Beck was seeing the field really well against Ole Miss. He just wasn't hitting the throws early on than he did in the second half, especially on that final drive. So very curious if there's going to be any turnovers in there as well. So it's going to be interesting. Fernando Mendoza, Mario Cristobal went to the same high school. Christopher Columbus there in Miami. It'll be a homecoming for him. It'll be a homecoming for the entire Miami team. Anything else in that game you're interested in?
Yeah, I like kind of the redemption arc in some ways for Carson Beck. I mean, I think you've got a guy that last year you kind of wondered when he got hurt and couldn't play for Georgia in the playoff, and he's going to Miami, and he's had the situation with his arm. You're wondering, okay, can he actually play, or is it just not going to work for him? And he actually had a decent year, and I thought he was the difference maker when they needed him to be. He was the $3 million quarterback that they bought.
Yeah.
And then Malachi. I mean, what an incredible talent he is. I just don't know that. I think he can create some issues against Indiana's defense, and in Indiana, for all of its talent and the way they work together and the scheme, and they don't really change much personnel. They keep largely the same personnel on them. Sometimes they'll go 3-3-5, but mostly it's a 4-2-5 or 3-3-5. How they match up with him is going to be challenging because I think he can kind of move without the ball and really kind of force them to do some things that they maybe aren't capable of handling very well. But then again, they get enough pressure on the quarterback, and that was after that first drive, which was devastating for their defense tonight. But afterwards, they were able to do that and disrupt the passing game. And then I want to see what does Beck do after that? When he gets disrupted, and can he, compose himself? And will Fletcher be the kind of running back that they really need him to be and can sustain drives? He played really well against Ohio State. I did not see that performance coming. I did not expect it. I thought Ohio State would do the exact opposite to them. Instead, they were very aggressive and physical and won the line of scrimmage. And they're going to have to do the same thing and respond well to adversity because they're going to have it.
Yeah, man. I cannot believe we're going to a national championship game where where Indiana's playing in it, and they're going to be the big favorite. I mean, college football has not had a first-time national champion since 1996, Florida. So like Indiana would be the first one since then to do it. Miami obviously hasn't won since 2001. Another interesting, not important at all, little factoid. It'll be the first time an Adidas school wins the championship since Tennessee in 1998, because only 2 Adidas teams made the championship game in the BCS era. I think one of those was Miami, and then the other was Washington a couple of years ago. But they're both Adidas schools, Indiana and Miami. So Nike shut out. Not only is the SEC shut out of the championship again, Nike is shut out. And they get shut out by eliminating Oregon. Indiana does. So tough, rough night for Phil Knight, I guess.
I think there's going to be a lot of reevaluation this offseason. And as we know, Chris, that the next 2 weeks are incredibly pivotal for what's coming next for the CFP. Does it expand? What kind of format do they have? But I think for the SEC, this is, third straight year they're shut out of the national title game. And I think, I've had it described to me that it was kind of going into the season, kind of an SEC Ponzi scheme. Get 11 teams in the poll. They win a couple of games early, and then you look at some of those games, you're like, yeah, I mean, in retrospect, LSU beating Clemson felt real big at the time, but was it really that big of a game? Alabama destroys Wisconsin. Well, so did everybody else. And you look at kind of throughout, and then they just kept getting teams never fell out of it's kind of like the net rankings in basketball. Teams never fell out. But I think that needs some reevaluation too.
it's because it's impossible to evaluate who is good or not. But here's a pretty fun stat to kind of also emphasize how top heavy the Big Ten is. Indiana's only losses over the last 2 years were to teams who played for the national championship, Ohio State and Notre Dame. Ohio State's only losses this season were to the teams that will play for the national championship, Miami and Indiana. And Oregon's only losses in the last 2 years are to 2 teams who play for the national championship. Ohio State last year, Indiana twice this year. So they've flipped places where the Big Ten is now such a top-heavy league. And ultimately, conferences are judged by what you do at the top. I do think the SEC has a lot of good teams, a lot of teams right there in the mushy middle, so to speak. But it's they're just not as good at the top. And that's what, like, someone made the point too. Like, the last couple of college football playoff games have probably helped the reputation of Kalen DeBoer a bit, who takes a lot of heat for Alabama losing the way they did. But when Kirby Smart then goes and loses to Ole Miss and misses the semifinals for 3 years in a row, and then Indiana does the same thing to Oregon that they did to Alabama, it's like, all right, like, Alabama's not out on an island there with the way it performed. That's how other teams are looking too. And it's just like, Alabama's never going to be back to what they were under Nick Saban. Nobody is. It's a different world now. And you can't compare what Kalen DeBoer does to what Nick Saban does. And it may take years for fan bases to kind of make that adjustment. And I think Alabama kind of did during the season. I think this year Alabama fans were appreciating wins more than they had in a long time. But then when the losses came at the end of the year, kind of those old feelings came back to the surface. It's just different now.
You know, I will debate you about the Big Ten's mushy middle, because I thought it was really good. I thought USC was really good. I mean, you look at, they lose on a field goal at basically a 9 o'clock in the morning game at Illinois, who I thought was pretty good. And it validates a lot of Brett Bielema's season, because they got smoked 63-10 at Indiana, which was an unreal atmosphere, by the way. And it was really comparable to this game. And I think Illinois was pretty good. You know, they beat Tennessee. I think Iowa was really good at 9-4. They lost 4 games by 15 points to Indiana, to Oregon, Iowa State, when Iowa State had its team there. USC on the road, it was pretty good. Michigan was the one out of the group that I thought was good at home, and it wasn't real good anywhere else. And I think that was the one, because of their schedule, that I think they kind of benefited from that. But I think teams through 10 or 11 in the Big Ten weren't that bad either. And Penn State was, I mean, you know, as much as, you know, they fired James Franklin, they finished 7-6, and 5 of those losses were by 1 score. So they just lost to UCLA. They lost to, you know, Northwestern. That really makes them look bad. But so I like the way that middle matches up with the Vanderbilts and Tennessees and even Alabama's of the SEC. So I think this will be a really interesting offseason debate. The only thing is, will Tony Petitti ever talk about it? Because
that's the thing. Or is he going to let Greg Sankey and the SEC talk like they own the sport? Because there's a really good chance the Big Ten's about to win 3 straight championships, and the conference doesn't really talk about itself like that. So we'll see. It'll be a heck of a scene down in Miami. I imagine the star-studded Miami alumni group is going to be ridiculous down there. Indiana will have a ton of fans as well. I'm sure Mark Cuban and will be down there. Nobody will be down there, though, from the 1894 Yale team. They won't be there to pop the champagne, rooting for the Hurricanes to keep their 16-0 thing alive. It has been done. Ferris State, I think, did it this year, I think, in D2, and North Dakota State did it a couple of years, I think 2019 in FCS. But I'm just at the top FBS, major, highest level, whatever you want to call it. There's only been one 16-0 team. I didn't think that was ever going to happen again, by the way, in the 12-team playoff era with the way the conferences are now. I didn't think we'd ever have an undefeated national champion again. And we were talking about that as Ohio State went on its run and won the championship. It's like, all right, we need to recalibrate how we look at national champions now. They're going to have a couple of losses Well, here's Indiana, undefeated, about to flip that on its head after 1 year. So we really never know what's going to happen. Any final thoughts?
One last thought for me is when you bring up the Ryan Day, imagine if it was only a 14 playoff last year, where we would be sitting with Ryan Day. Would he still be the coach of the Ohio State University? I don't know. I mean, if they lose 2 games the way they did, even if it was a 14 playoff this year and they lose by 3 to Indiana and they lose again, I think that could probably end it. So that's how the 12-team playoff impacted Ohio State this year. It's going to impact teams in the future because we saw it with Miami. Miami wins it. Heck, they would have been lucky to be in Orange Bowl or something like that in years past. So I think that the 12-team playoff is showing up. And frankly, had Notre Dame gotten in, Notre Dame could have been in a similar situation. I think they were that good.
Yeah, I agree. But that's the thing. So the last 3 years, 12 semifinalists, 11 different schools. And now we might have a first-time national champion. We have 2 teams that haven't won. 2 teams, one of whom was Indiana. The other was the number 10 seed, the last team to get in. Indiana will play Miami for the national championship. Unbelievable playoff. Can't wait for that game. Scott, thank you for joining us. We will be back with Bunch Formation next week when David is back home. We're aiming for a Monday show as usual. Send any of your feedback and comments to bunchformationpod@gmail.com. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you don't. And if you're watching on Twitter, subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Got a lot of fun stuff coming up next week. Can't wait to do it. Scott, thank you for joining us as well. By the way, let them know where they can find your stuff.
Yeah, just look for me at The Athletic and also on X at Scott Dochterman, or my podcast, Legends and Listeners with Chad Leistico, which comes out weekly.
I got to say, the Legends and Leaders divisions, like it was ahead of its time in hindsight.
If you remove the name, the concept worked well.
Yeah. All right. For Scott Dochterman, I'm Chris Vannini. Thank you for listening and watching to Bunch Formation. We will talk to you next Monday. And for one final time in the national championship game, bring back the turnover chain. We'll see you.